from 57% to 48%. What's going on? Why are fewer people going to government health facilities? Why are more Tanzanians doing nothing when they're needing medical attention? So that's interesting to try and understand. Now, in many countries, and I can't claim to be an expert on this one, but in many countries, three special populations tend to be given free access to healthcare. Number one, children below the age of 5. You shouldn't pay for medical services. Pregnant women and nursing mothers, you don't usually pay for health services. They're supposed to be free. And then the elderly, people over the age of 60 also are supposed to get it for free. But when you look at those who actually, the last time they went to health services, did receive it for free, there's still significant minorities who are not enjoying this right. You know, in Kenya, for example, children below the age of 5, almost 1/3 need to pay for this. In Tanzania, it's just 13%. In Uganda, it's 1 child in 5. For pregnant women, again, Kenya, more than in any other country up for that. And persons over 60, it would seem 61% of Kenyan older people need to pay when they go to medical, access medical facilities. So the country where the smallest group of people have to pay is Tanzania. You know, seems like in Tanzania, those three populations have better access to free medical services compared to our neighbors in Uganda and Kenya. We asked, you know, during COVID, we wanted to get a sense of our beliefs, you know, as East Africans about the science behind the vaccine effectiveness and everything else. We were able to do a survey slightly secretly in Tanzania. We weren't supposed to do this quite publicly. I can say so now without being arrested. But we did ask this question secretly, and many other questions around COVID. But it would appear that Kenyans are more likely than Tanzanians to believe that COVID-19 is effective. The vaccines of COVID-19 effective, and Kenyans are less likely to believe common myths about COVID-19. If you want more data, we have a full brief on the COVID-19 experience, myths, understandings from the surveys that we did during that period. I have to say also, we come to a bit later, we did a lot of work with the government of Kenya and the government of Uganda during COVID to help them understand how citizens were experiencing the disease, what they were understanding about how to prevent and protect themselves from it. And so the governments both adjusted their messaging in order to reach the people who were perhaps not understanding what the issues were. So that was an important partnership we had with the governments at that time. Water. This is a very interesting diagram, but in general, the pattern is showing that access to improved water supply in rural communities was going up in all three countries. And if you can tell the difference between the big blocks and the small blocks, the big blocks are the Sauti Wananchi data points, and they more or less track what the little blocks, these are the official surveys, are showing. So they more or less track and are in tandem with each other here. But what I should say, let me see if it's here, is that, again, collaboration with the government of Uganda, that our data helped them to sharpen their definition of access to water in Uganda, you know, based on our Sauti findings and the way we also crafted the question. We had an interesting debate here in Tanzania about how the government defines access. And I think for the government definition, it is a water point within 400 meters of a household. That's something that is accessible, a water point. Now, when you ask them, is there water coming out of that water point? The answer is, we don't know. You know, so a water point can be defined as a government as access, but if there's no water, citizens define access in other ways. They go to other places to get their water, to get the actual service itself. What are the other comparisons? The average collection times for water are longer in rural than urban areas, as you could imagine, but they're also longer in Tanzania than in Kenya or Uganda. So that's the green bar that is higher mostly in Tanzania than in Kenya and Uganda, in rural and in all, and it's slightly longer in Kenya, in Uganda, in the urban areas compared to the other two countries. But they're more or less the same here at the very last as group of three blocks. Maybe Tanzania is just a bigger country. You got to walk further to get your water. And what are the challenges? What the big challenge in all three countries top is distance to water points as being the big challenge, and then insufficient water points, which is linked to the distance as number two. And then dirty water. So you walk all the way there. Challenge number three is that 1 in 5 are saying the water is just dirty, and irregular supply of water being number 4 as some of the challenges of accessing clean water. But the significant numbers say, no problems. 1 in 5 in Kenya and in Tanzania, probably mostly urban, have no challenges with that. In Uganda, it's much smaller, 10% have no problems. So we asked, how do you treat your water? And large numbers, 2/3 treat the water in some way. And by far and away, the most is boiling in Tanzania and Uganda. In Kenya, it's both boiling and chemical treatment. So Kenyans have access to more access to chemical treatment compared to Tanzanians at just 5%, or Ugandans are just 7%. Yeah. But we try to treat our water one way or another. And the final block of themes and questions, when it comes across, there we go, is governance. Here's an interesting thing. We asked them, how do you identify yourself first? As a citizen or as something else? And there's a very interesting difference between Kenyans, Tanzanians, and Ugandans. Only 1/4 of Kenyans identify themselves as Kenyans first, right, as citizens first, compared to 2/3 of Tanzanians and just over half of Ugandans. Yeah, that's fascinating. But when Kenya's winning the gold medal in the running, everybody's Kenyan on the entire continent. Yeah? But it's interesting, when you ask them, they identify only 1/4 as Kenyan first. But everybody's very proud of their citizenship. Okay, that one, we were very proud of our citizenship. And again, even if you don't win gold medals, Tanzania, we're still very proud of you. What are the attributes that we like about ourselves? For Kenya, top 2 are identity card and peacefulness in Kenya. In Tanzania, 70% peacefulness. We like our amani na utulivu. Same thing in Uganda, also 58% peacefulness. The ones that come after, where we're in common, Uganda and Tanzania, warm, friendly, hospitable personalities. But that doesn't show up at all in Kenya. In Kenya, patriotism, love, unity, and religiousness, right? But in Tanzania and Uganda, it seems like number 2 in our priority is warmth, friendliness, hospitality. Number 3 in Tanzania is our language for communication, Kiswahili chetu. In Uganda, it's united. The one that shows up in Tanzania and Uganda also is respect for others. Yeah? And we're polite. The one that does not show up in Tanzania top 5 is religion. Huh? It's interesting. Whereas in the top 5 for both Kenya and Uganda, the religiousness is something that they take pride in. Here's another question that we found is always interesting to think about. What do we really value? If you ask someone, what values do you want to pass on to the next generation, to your children? And then you rank them, and they had a choice of up to 3. So we ranked the most mentioned. And this was done, I think, in 2016 or 2017. And across the top 3 had these in common: tolerance and respect, number 1 in Kenya and Tanzania, number 2 in Uganda. Religious faith, number 2 in Kenya, number 4 in Tanzania, and number 3 in Uganda. Hard work, number 3 in Kenya, number 2 in Tanzania, number 1 in Uganda. So tolerance and respect, our faith, hard work, top 3 things that we would like to pass on to the next generation. So I got to tell you, we repeated this question just a few months ago in Tanzania, and that picture changed quite a bit in Tanzania. Spoiler alert, tolerance and respect and obedience came tumbling down. They went very far down, below 5, 6, and 7. They came really crashing down. The ones that went up were hard work, independence, integrity, creativity, and imagination. Faith, however, is in there. Faith has gone up. But hard work, independence, integrity, and faith are the top 4 in Tanzania. So in just 6 years, things seems to be changed. As I was explaining to somebody when we were doing this, the communal values in Tanzania seems to have fallen down the rankings, and the individual values amongst Tanzanians seem to have gone up, you know. So those of you listening in Tanzania, in Uganda and Kenya, wa Tanzania tunabadilika kidogo. Yeah, we're changing. Although we like our ujamaa, it seems like we like it as a community spirit, but for our own children, we really emphasizing the personal qualities and values to get you ahead in life. It's fascinating. We asked what direction, overall, would you say the country is going in the right or wrong direction? Look at the color scheme there. Kenya, lots of red, wrong direction, 71% in 2018, down to 52% in 2022. But remember the optimism that they were still showing in 2022, expecting that the next year will be better. In Tanzania, a flipped picture, right? Lots in 2020 when we asked, I think we're going in the right direction. And then President Magufuli passes away, President Samia comes to power. We ask in November 2021, and the number shrinks to 18%. It's replaced by a great deal of uncertainty. The big yellow is uncertainty. Yeah, not quite sure, don't know. And again, in Tanzania, 2022, a year later, we asked the same question. Again, the uncertainty still is very big. Okay? But I should tell you, since you spent time to come all the way here, we asked this question again 2 months ago. The uncertainty has shrunk to just 12%, from 66 and 44 to 12. And going in the right direction has gone from 18% to 30% to 59%. I think it's 69%. 69%, right? So that green has become much more bigger. Uganda, there you see far less uncertainty, and the trend seems to be going in the wrong direction. These are how citizens are feeling about Uganda. We also ask about, okay, how are you participating in community meetings, especially the ones that we have around governance issues? And we ask them, to self-report, and when you're self-reporting, you'll give yourself high marks, I think. Kenyans seem 56% have attended at least one community meeting in the previous year. 75% of Tanzanians say they've attended these meetings. But in Tanzania, we have meetings, are supposed to have meetings every quarter, every 3 months. So maybe there's more chance for people to attend. Uganda, I think they only have one statutory meeting per year, at the local community level. And so you see 40% of Ugandans say they have been to a community meeting at that time. And it would appear that more men than women in Kenya attend these meetings, more women than men attend these meetings in Tanzania, and more men than women in Uganda, even though in Uganda, the proportion of the total population is lower. Where do we get our information from? Again, a difference. If you look at Tanzania and Uganda, radio rules the waves. Kenya, television rules the waves. 84% get from TV compared to 65% from TV in Tanzania, and 34% in Uganda from TV. Interestingly, word of mouth is a big source of information in Uganda, compared to word of mouth, 6% only in Tanzania and 23% in Kenya. Social media, again, 47% overall in Kenya, 24% in Tanzania, and 11% in Uganda, getting information from social media. What I have not shown here is when we'd ask them, how much do you trust these sources of information? Social media comes crashing down, even though many people, quite a number, get from social media, but their trust in social media is lower than their trust in radio and television and newspapers. For those of you who are in the newspaper industry, look, only 10% of Kenyans get theirs, 9% in Tanzania, and 8% in Uganda. Newspaper industry is tough. And this is showing in terms of the demand for information there. Almost finished with the governance. We asked their interaction with refugees. We've had, of course, a region in which refugees have come into our countries. And we asked how many have interacted with refugees in any way. Uganda, 1/3 of Ugandans have interacted with refugees one way or another. A quarter of Kenyans, but less than 10% of Tanzanians have interacted with refugees in any way. And I think this is reflected in how we feel about what assistance to give to refugees in our countries. So we all agree largely that healthcare, security and safety, and education we need to give to our refugees. Then we differ in terms of permanence of their status in our countries. Permission to work, Kenyans are, okay, 72% okay. Tanzanians, no. Only half of us say, okay, they can have permission to work in the country. Ugandans are even more liberal, allow them to work in Uganda. Citizenship, Ugandans are more, comfortable with giving citizenship to Ugandans, to refugees, compared to Tanzanians, only 1/3, or Kenyans also another 1/3. Access to land, interestingly also, Ugandans are quite relaxed at 58%. Tanzanians are least relaxed about it, only a quarter say they should have access to land. And Kenyans are even more relaxed than Tanzanians on the issue of access to land for refugees. So what have we achieved with all of these questions and lots of conversations and briefs? Well, quite a bit, especially in the media. Yeah. And one of the things that Violet said, and I said, is to try and seed a national conversation about how citizens are experiencing life, So, and we do deliberately go into the media and say, this is what is going on in this country. This is how citizens are feeling about it. And the media have been fantastic partners of us in spreading, in seeding this conversation. And it's a great way for policymakers to also get a sense of the temperature in the country on specific issues. So this is a whole, important engagement, public engagement about data and statistics, helping citizens to make sense of this. But it's also a promise we give to our panelists that we're going to ask you questions. We're going to take your precious time, but we are hoping to have you contribute to a much broader national conversation, but also to changes that can be made as a result of what you're saying. Let me pick a few where some real change happened. And of course, for me, the one headline is 2 years ago when the mobile money levy transactions tax in Tanzania was removed as a result of lots of robust public conversation after Sauti Wananchi was launched, saying two major important things. Number one, Tanzanians understand the importance of paying taxes. We understand that it is important to pay taxes for our own development. However, for this specific tax, it was too high and we did not know what it was going to do, So that was the big message that was coming out of the Tanzanians at that time. Lots of debate for 1 or 2 or 3 months. And by the end of October 2022, beginning of October 2022, the mobile money transactions tax was removed, right? From that, we think was an important step. I mentioned earlier about improving sanitation and hygiene indicators in Uganda as a result of the Sauti Wananchi surveys on water access. Let's see, which other one can I pick? Oh yes, the enhancing health service delivery to vulnerable citizens in Tanzania. After we did that survey, the Minister for Health at that time, I think she was Deputy Minister for Health at that time, really sent out a circular to all health service providers across the country. And we even saw a little bit an uptick about a year later or 18 months later when we asked that question. More of the vulnerable populations were having free access to healthcare at that time. I should say, even politicians pay attention to these. In 2015, when we shared data in Tanzania about the potential election results at that time, the opposition parties were not very happy, but I can tell you they changed the election campaigns for the final month of campaigning, and they closed the gap. The gap was 65 to 25. By the end of the result, the gap was 58% to 45%. 58% went to CCM and Magufuli, and 45% or 48% went to Chadema and Lowassa. They changed their campaign strategy as a result of seeing what citizens understood and what they preferred there. I think from an even deeper policy level, although it's a bit wonkish, the government of Kenya, through the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, has found a way, a mechanism to incorporate, as part of official statistics, citizen-generated data. And Sauti Wananchi is citizen-generated data. So citizens who are now able to independently collect data, as long as it meets certain criteria, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics is now engaging and including that in measuring SDG progress in that country. And they've come and tried to encourage our National Bureau of Statistics here as Kenyans, as Kenyan BS, to say, you really ought to think about doing similar things, listening more to your citizens and embedding their views in your own statistics. So that was 10 years of Sauti za Wananchi. I hope that there will be perhaps another 10 more years. But other than that, thank you very much for listening. And I'd like to invite my panelists to come and sit with me and we have a conversation while I take a glass of water and you reflect a little bit on what we've seen, and then we'll get into a conversation about East Africa. Thank you all very much for listening. So maybe I'll invite Sammy, who's here in Tanzania, to join me here. And then I'll invite our friend Charles and Christine in Kenya. And Charles, the moderator, Charles M. in Uganda. Thank you. Hello, Charles and Christine. I just want to check that you can hear me.
Mic check. Can you hear me, Aidan?
Oh, we can hear you loud and clear. Nice to see you, Christine. Let me,
Awesome.
and Charles, oh.
Hi, I can hear you, Aidan.
Oh, fantastic. We can also hear you. Although I'll ask my team to raise the volume in this room for Uganda. How about Charles M?
Hi, I can hear you, Aidan.
Hello, Charles. Nice
Hello.
to see you.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Okay, so let's dive right into this. And I'm going to ask the first question, or maybe just a reaction, to you, Christine. And I'm picking on you because a few years ago, you actually wrote a blog when we began thinking about doing a comparison. So, Christine, my question to you is, did anything surprise you from this, what you read, from what you've heard? Is there anything that has surprised you? And if so, what? And if not, why not?
Thanks, Aidan. I think it goes back more than a year. I remember it was maybe 8 or 9 years ago when Sauti za Wananchi had just begun in Kenya. I did some writing around compiling some of the Kenya insights. So it's been a long journey for me. But going to the compendium, a lot of things really jumped out at me. One of them being your very first slide on the data, which was the main sources of income for households in the region. It was very interesting to me that the picture was very different across the 3 countries, which tells me that Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania are actually very different places. In Kenya, you know, we grew up knowing that agriculture is the backbone of our economy, and you know, those things that we used to be told and we used to know are true, but it turns out that's not the case anymore. In Kenya, the biggest number of households depend on casual work, and of course, we can dig deeper into what casual work means and what kind of jobs those are. But I would say, from how I understand it, it's more of precarious informal employment, right? That you cannot really rely on, that has a lot of uncertainty in it. And then in Uganda, that agriculture was the highest source of income and livelihood. That didn't surprise me, but of course, like you mentioned, for self-employment or business having the same proportion as agriculture in Tanzania, very surprising. I think that's something that I really was not expecting. I would have expected it to be the opposite, like for Kenya to have that kind of picture, right? But really, it speaks a lot to the trends that are happening in our society that kind of push people out of agriculture in Kenya, and the place where they can find some kind of livelihood or sustenance is in the informal economy. I think another one that really surprised me is when we look at how many are in formal employment, that in Uganda, it's actually just 5%. That's almost negligible, right? That 5% of Ugandans are in formal employment, and actually the same proportion, 5%, say that they do not have a source of income. Their answer was none. What's your source of income? And they said none. It's the same 5% as, informal employment. I just think that not to give my fellow panelists also time to speak, it's that this survey, I think, creates a very heterogeneous picture in the region, that our different societies are actually quite different from each other, that even as we think of ourselves as the EAC, the East African Community, there are a lot of similarities, of course, and people say Africa is a country, and in some ways it is, but also in other ways that those differences actually matter a lot, and the specificities and the particularities of each place are important.
Thank you, Christine. That's interesting. I want to go to Charles M. in Uganda. Charles, maybe this is one of your first or early experiences with Sauti za Wananchi. What did you see in that presentation that surprised you, Charles?
Thank you, Aiden. What stands out for me is how the findings link to one another. A highly agriculture dependent country, 69%, that's almost 70% of the population, is also a country likely to save the least, is also the country that's likely to have the least insurance, because you don't insure agriculturalists. They don't save, they don't have what to save. And you see that running across the three areas that you surveyed. They link with governance questions and how we respond to them. They link with the economic question, and it's intriguing for me, especially when it comes to the question of hope. How we depend on hope that 12 months from today things will be better. Then you have that interesting figure on the three things that we think are important, and religiousness. So there is a lot of merchandising of hope in a country that 38% of the population wants to pass on to their children religiousness, which links to the questions we ask about our governance, we ask about our service delivery. I find that a bit disturbing, particularly for Uganda. You look across the border in Kenya and see where the priorities are. If you have the 17% informal employment, how do they confront governance questions? How do they question governance? How do they relate? If you look at the similar question in Tanzania, 10% formal employment, 5% more than Uganda. How do they deal with the other questions? But you realize that Tanzanians are a lot more in self-employment. Does that push them a lot to interact with government agencies? Are they asking different questions? For me, those are some of the areas that really stand out for me.
Well, thank you. It's great to saw the connections between the various themes there. There was some Kenyans are surprised by the fact that Tanzanians are in business. What else, if anything at all, have you seen here in these presentations that made you think, I didn't think about that, or many of the countries?
I think there's entrepreneurship as well. The entrepreneurship as well surprised me very much. For some reason, I thought the Kenyans would be more entrepreneurs than Tanzanians. But then when I think about even in different offices that I've worked in, on any given day, a colleague will come with milk or mapapai. They'll bring eggs or things like that to sell to fellow colleagues. And I think that says a lot about what this data is telling us. But also, when you go on different streets, everyone is selling something. They could be the same, but everyone is selling something. And it makes me wonder, is it because our income, our formal income is not enough? Is it because we're not sure about, the pension? What would happen if I lose this job? Or is it because we don't have, a lot of us don't have these formal jobs, employments. That's why people opt to go into informal or into entrepreneurship. So that surprised me very much. Maybe I should.
Yeah, I think, I hope you can all hear me. All of you have sort of stuck on the bread and butter issue. All of you have noticed the bread and butter issues, and I think it reflects the fact that livelihoods is a concern across all three countries in terms of the challenges that people are facing. So let me come to you, my friend Charles O. in Nairobi. You and I go back a long way, and I've always been fascinated by how you can pick the unexpected, the surprising, the unnoticed in a lot of information, whether it's text or numbers. Tell me if you've picked anything here in this presentation, this compendium that you may have had a chance to look at, that really you think, oh, I need to write about this in my next East African column. Hint, hint.
Aidan, actually, when I was reading the report, I have a laundry list of about 12 surprises. So I'll just speak
oh, lovely.
to a couple of them. And one of them is, one of the things when I was reading at this is, I also was alive or looked at other data. And let me pick just 3 or 4. One is, I was very, very surprised by the low reporting of Kenya of public service provision as, just the level of contentment is fairly high, or disaffection was very, very low. That particularly if you then see where we are today, that was very surprising. But then when I thought of it again, during the time of the presidency of Uhuru Kenyatta, particularly during COVID, Kenya made, I think, the most robust investments around health, water, and all that. So when you look at that, you kind of begin to say, oh, this is the data which is showing up. But then when you look at the data on optimism, the same period where you have this investment and this level of content with public service delivery, you have very, very high levels of disaffection about the direction of the country. So that was very surprising to me. The other thing that is not as, it was surprising, but I was very intrigued by the data from Tanzania of reporting higher self-employment and business, being in business and self-employment than Uganda and Tanzania, than Uganda and Kenya. Now, I am very skeptical. Not that I'm skeptical. I think that what we are seeing here is it tells us what is happening in Uganda and Kenya. I think there's a lot of underreporting that you begin to see, and in Kenya it expresses itself around the recent protests of attacks, that we are seeing a cessation or basically an attempt by citizens to shield their businesses away from public view so that the state doesn't tax them. And the reason why I think this is the case, if you look at the Tanzanian data, I was very struck that the Tanzanian report the lowest livestock ownership in East Africa. You know, this cannot be true because Tanzania has a livestock, you know, its cattle stock is 37 million. It is the second highest in Africa after Ethiopia. So to have that level of livestock and this very low level of reporting means that the Tanzanians are lying about this too. So you notice those that behavior of citizens shielding certain of their assets from the long hand of the tax collector and the, a prying state. And I was really, really very surprised that Ugandans think that what they should impart to the next generation is hard work. If that had been Kenya, I would have said, yeah, these figures. But Ugandans, it was a bit surprising. And also the data, and this, for anyone who knows Uganda, and it is a good cultural economy, like Charles Mwangusha spoke. The question of food security and abundance, because if you look at, if you look at food inflation in Uganda, it's less than 1%. I think it's like 0.89%, and availability. And that to then have a situation where, and it might be lower than Kenya, but in terms of trending upwards, it is sharper. That this food, hunger and food, and basically lack of access to food, that it should be happening. The way the data shows it, I think that's fairly scary for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's why, we sort of called it hidden hunger. And my hypothesis, completely untested, is that it's probably an issue to do more with the ability to pay for the food, because you can have your bananas, your potatoes, whatever, but you need salt and sugar, cooking oil and other things. Maybe those are the kinds of things where it is, you need to pay cash if your incomes are not high enough. You experience a certain food insecurity. Thank you for telling us that we're talking, Charles, about our cows. So let me ask, I'll go back to Uganda and ask Charles M. to respond to your question about Ugandans lying about hard work. Both of you mentioned this issue of Ugandans, wanting to impart, Charles M., you said religion, you're not surprised. Charles O., you're saying hard work, I don't believe it. Charles M., what do you think? Could you elaborate a little bit more on that specific issue? Is there a difference in Uganda?
I think I agree with Charles. I was really surprised. Ugandans and hard work, imparting that to the next generation. I am looking at the audience here that we have, and I think we all have the same question. So I am equally surprised that would top the list of what we want to pass on. I think there are so many other things. Hard work wouldn't be one of them. If you look at other data that's been available, I think we put in the least productive hours in East Africa when it comes to work. We sometimes think it's stereotypical, but if you go to check, you might find it's actually true. So I don't think I'm in a position to go beyond that. But if you will allow Aiden to pick up something that that you just commented on the yes, question of food insecurity. May I?
Yes, I was going to ask you to do exactly that. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I think the reason might be more to how we are able to move the food from areas that produce it to areas that face food stress. If the surveyors were looking at, for example, there are areas, regions of the country that will have plenty of food, giving it away for a throwaway price, and areas that suffer significant food stress. To move that food to the areas that need it could explain the anxiety that we have around food, the possibility that someone will spend a day without a meal, will be anxious on whether they will have their next meal. Yes, coupled with what you said about having the money to buy the food. I think that might offer an explanation.
Can I ask you, because one of the myths, or maybe myth is too strong a word, expectations, is that Uganda is such a fertile country that you shouldn't be experiencing food stress. Does this data somehow upend or put a hole in that kind of myth of the it's called the paradox, or the appearance of abundance, but actually the abundance is not being experienced by Ugandans or maybe by Tanzanians? I'll ask you, Charles, first, and then I'll come to you here, Sammy. Tell us about this abundance thing. Maybe it's time to put that idea to rest. What do you think?
I think the abundance is true. There is a lot of food in this country, but you'll find a situation where people are selling a bunch of matoke in Western Uganda for 2,000 shillings. They'll take it to a market and leave it there because they didn't have a buyer, and because every neighbor has matoke, they're producing and it's ripening in the garden. But you find that citizens in Karamoja, for example, are starving. They haven't had rains for a long time. They're food stressed. But to move the food from a location in Western Uganda to Moroto, for example, becomes a big problem. And therefore, the question for me might speak to, the answer might speak to that. That ability to move the food from where it's being produced in plenty to where it is needed. That could be part of the explanation. Number two, we've had some issues with commercialization of what would have been traditional food crops. Kenyans are buying a lot of Ugandan maize. I understand now we're sending a lot of it. There is a lot of competition to send it to Malawi, to I think Zimbabwe or Zambia, one of the two. And there are no protections back home to say you can't sell what you have produced. So if people are able to sell all their produce without reserving for the family, thinking that they'll keep cash, the cash will run out and that family will have anxieties around food, I suspect.
I think the problem could also be how unreliable agriculture has become. And I'm speaking this from very personal experience because I am a farmer. Can you believe that? I remember for 2 consecutive seasons, I've tried to grow about 20 acres of maize, and I only get about 5 or 7 sacks of 100 kilos. And this is the case that I see to my neighbors as well. And a lot of more and more of them now are selling their farms. Just my neighbors have sold about 200 acres, and someone from town have come and buy that piece of land. And most of them now are getting into businesses. Like you say, they're buying motorcycles so that they can at least do business through that way. So agriculture is becoming more and more unreliable. The rains are not there, and you put a lot of work on it, but you're not producing enough. We also see a lot of young people are not staying in the villages. They're not staying there to farm because they understand how difficult that is. And then they move out of town to come and be border drivers or street vendors. In that case, they have to buy this food, like you said. The food becomes more expensive because we are all border drivers, we're all street vendors, we all have small businesses, probably selling the same things. And when we try to buy food, it's very expensive because the farmers are not producing enough for us to buy. So that could be one of the reasons.
I think the point Charles M. made also is that our citizens are competing for the food with Zambians, with Malawians, in Tanzania with Kenyans, so we're doing quite a bit of exporting of food. Those of you here will know in Tanzania, when I say here in Tanzania, that I think we struck a deal to sell, I don't know how many millions of dollars of maize to Zambia just 2 months ago. This is maize that would have been lower priced for Tanzanians, is now being sold to Zambia, which is in real need of food, so we're competing. So there is a sense of, there is regional integration happening, right, of our food markets, and it's having an effect on our local populations and their food security. Just to let you know, we'll have another round with the panelists, and then I'm going to open it up to the 3 countries for audiences to state their opinions or don't ask too many questions. Just, tell us how you felt about this. But I also want to give a shout out to our technical team. I mean, this is wonderful. I feel like I'm on CNN. Huh? Please give a shout out to the technical teams in Uganda and in Kenya. This is really quite amazing. Thank you very much. So, Christine, I want to come to you. Let's change tack a little bit. Let's talk about trends, okay? You're a good person to talk about trends. Tell me if you've seen any trends that are getting stronger or that might weaken if we look into the future. Which trends struck you, Christine, and why? And do you think they're going to get stronger, more pronounced, or they're going to just fade away? Christine.
I think I would speak to some of what has already been said. Some of the data shows, actually all of the data shows that there's a shrinking use of public health facilities, for example, in all of the 3 countries. Higher food insecurity, especially in Kenya. And when it comes to public services, it seems like there is more of a withdrawal of citizens from seeking government services across the board. I think that's something that can be marked as a trend. And in some ways, it's actually quite interesting because it kind of shows a kind of withdrawal of the state in some ways, and what that means for our social contract. Like, why does the state exist? Why does governance exist if they're not providing the services or the services are not accessible, right? Then what is the whole point of this state, right? I think just having a bit of a even more bird's eye view, Aidan, what you've presented today touches on livelihoods, on public services, and on governance. And one of the things that we've seen increasingly happening in Kenya from the state level is a kind of governmental position as a policy to quote unquote export labor or export Kenyans and give them opportunities. You can see my air quotes, opportunities to work abroad as actually a state policy, which is hugely problematic, but it really does speak to kind of the next step. After you've seen data like this, how do our governments interpret the solution? Now that livelihoods, 75% of Kenyans are saying that they don't have enough income to meet their daily needs, food insecurity is getting higher, there's a shrinking use of public services, kind of a withdrawal of the state. Where does that leave the people and the government, right? In some ways, that whole idea of like migration or labor export is one of the things that I actually see trending and will trend more, because the fundamentals actually create the conditions for that kind of policy, right? And we can critique the policy. And of course, like I said, a lot of problems with thinking of your citizens as goods to export. I really hate that framing personally. But when you look at the conditions that are in place right now, and the trends that we're seeing in terms of population, livelihoods, governance, and all that, I think that's one of the things that we definitely are going to be watching more. And that's something that I think Sauti za Wananchi could do in the future, if you've not done it already, is kind of get more data and more of a sense on migration and on the labor markets abroad. That whole idea of the solution to all these issues that we are seeing emerging in the data. Oh, what's the solution? Let's just export our people, It kind of solves all these things at once, right? It solves the income issue. It solves the public services. They are not here, so they won't be coming to our public hospitals or whatever. It also solves the governance issue. You know, they're far away, you know. So I just kind of like, when I'm thinking about this data, thinking of what that looks like from that perspective.
Can I ask you though, Christine, before you hand over, what do you make of the optimism that Kenyans seem to have in abundance, huge abundance compared to Ugandans and Tanzanians over the next 12 months? What do you make of that gap between their current experience and the optimism they have for a better future?
Actually, Aidan, this is the data that I quoted last year that you mentioned, that Kenyans are more optimistic about their personal circumstances in a year's time than the country's situation in a year's time. In Tanzania, it's kind of the opposite. They're more optimistic about how good the country will be in 12 months' time compared to their own like personal circumstances. And then in Uganda, there's no clear trend either way, right? You can't really see a trend of whether it's personal or the country. And I think in some ways that speaks to maybe how disconnected Ugandan people are to the whole situation that's happening in governance, right? That the politics and the governance, even if you look at how important governance is on their mind, it kind of speaks to it kind of speaks to a kind of breakdown, I could say, of like that kind of relationship between the citizens and the governance, right? But I think in the Kenyan case of being hugely optimistic about their personal circumstances, I was actually reading a book yesterday that was it's an ethnographic study of folks who come in from rural Kenya and settle in places like Pipeline and Donholm and all these places in Eastlands in Nairobi. And it talks about how, you know, how optimistic they are about how they are just about to break through. Like everyone in Kenya believes they're just on the verge of a breakthrough, right? In Nairobi, we call it kuomoka. Tuko karibu tu kuomoka, like we're just about to, you know, it's just, yeah, everyone is just about to omoka, you know. I think what Charles in Uganda said, it has something to do with like how we practice religion. For us, religion is not really, I don't think it's a set of doctrines or like a set of beliefs per se. It's more like the fuel that keeps those dreams alive, right? Religion is what kind of fuels our dreams that this is going to change in no time. In some ways, and of course, in the kind of stereotypically individualistic Kenyan mind, that breakthrough is going to be a personal breakthrough, right? And even the way we speak about salvation, I would say, in like Kenyan evangelical spaces, we're always talking about Jesus being our personal savior, right? So we kind of individualize a lot of things in a way that maybe is less evident in Tanzania, for example. The communal values, I think, are much higher in Tanzania, where it's like a kind of situation.
Although they're fading, Christine, the communal values are fading here. But what you're saying
Oh,
is that
and they're fading.
have not only merchandised the anointing, they have privatized the savior, right?
Correct. Okay. Jesus is your personal savior. So that's what we say in Kenya. And of course, it shows up in our unshaking belief that our personal circumstances are just on the verge of a breakthrough.
Of improving.
Yes.
Charles, I can see you're smiling. Let me ask you this question, Charles, next to Christine there. What trends do you think are fading and might disappear, if any?
You know, there was a bit of data in the Tanzanian where we see that there was a certain level of optimism around the Magufuli period, which then kind of shrinks when it goes to the Suluhu period. And you know, this is something which, I mean, it pops up in various ways in the data. There is this thing which I see as a bipolar East Africa. And you know, we are a very interesting lot. We are, I think the Tanzanian case demonstrates what I would call the authoritarian premium, this is a region which puts a lot of, East Africa loves good authoritarians, good dictators. But at the same time, we hanker a lot for democracy. It's a very polar, reality. So I think that we will continue to see a lot of conversation about that. I think that when you look at the data and around food security, which Christine has referred to, I think that in terms of how that will express itself, I think there is going to be a whole new dynamic around climate change because it seems to inform a lot of this thing and a lot of positioning about mobilization, thinking and acting on that. That is a trend which I see, will likely be very strong. And then I think that we will, remain on this pessimistic streak for quite a while. I do not see any dynamic in Kenya, and in fact, in Kenya, one of the things I felt that the data wasn't very, very strong around 2023. That if the data had been very strong for 2023, I think it would look very, very different around Kenya, in a lot of this respect. And I think that if you look at that, if you look at Uganda, we will continue to be on a very, very pessimistic streak. But at the same time, we will see that duality.
The duality. So it's interesting you say we love a good authoritarian, but we hanker for democracy at the same time.
Yeah.
We've got to figure that one out, right? So I want to come to the last question to my Tanzanian colleague and my friend in Uganda, and it's about our regional integration project itself, right? The formal coming together of the East African community. The ultimate goal is political federation. So given what you have seen, I'll start with you, Sammy, here. What is your prognosis about a potential political and a tighter economic union in East Africa, even at least amongst these three countries? What is your prognosis? Do you think good, or are you worried that, we're a bit stuck? And I'll ask the same question of you, Charles M. in Uganda.
I think it's not good. And I think it will remain like this for a very long time. We Tanzanians are very suspicious of our neighbors somehow, and we love our land very much. You saw even how we don't even want to share it with refugees. I think that will remain for a very long time. We also like to believe that we're a very peaceful nation. So any attempts to bring in neighbors, the Kenyans who are demonstrating, non-stop, and Ugandans and everything. So if we integrate with them, then it will disrupt our peace. Tusema amani, mshikamano na vitu vyote hivyo. So I don't see the integration happening very, very. So then this is from Wananchi wa kawaida all the way up to the leaders. So I'm not very much optimistic about that.
Yeah, Charles M., what's your thought on the prognosis for regional integration or even a political federation from your perspective there in Kampala?
I think we have, we're still looking at each other as individual countries largely. We'll stay in that space for quite some time. The numbers from Uganda speak to this. Do we think our country is going in the right direction? 49% of us, less than 50%, think so. But, in the right direction. But a significant percentage at 40 thinks we're going in the wrong direction. Then you have that middle 11%. What does that speak to us as a country that goes into an election in under 15 months? And if you look at how we're approaching the campaign, I don't think we have a lot of time to think about East Africa in these circumstances. There's another statistic that stood out for me. I was sharing it with Dr. Lugalambi in the audience here and Violet about how we seek medical attention. I thought I should mention this and crack up Charles a little bit across the border in Kenya. 2% of us went to seek help of a traditional healer. But what is interesting is the shift from the year 2019 and the year 2021. You know, we're going into an election at that time. So I was wondering whether there is a link with between the ailments we feel around political times, because we must have been thinking that every little itch was from a political opponent, and our quick solution was with a traditional healer. I looked at that and it stood out for me. But it speaks to, I'm not really, you don't feel the discussion around our East Africanness. It's happening organically among the communities, but I think at governmental level, we are consumed in the politics of each individual country. And for Uganda, it is going to be President Yoweri Museveni seeking another term in office. The discussion around whether he hands over to General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, and where political leaders in the opposition find their space. For now, that is the focus, and that's going to be the focus for the foreseeable future, as I see it. Different from Tanzania, right. Different from Kenya. Tanzania is implementing, is on a run, is on a roll with their economic projects. They are running ahead of everyone else. Kenya, and then come back to think about how, one, it competes with the other economies in the region, but number two, how President Ruto deals with the pressure he's getting from the young people.
Okay, so I have one very brief question one question for all of you, trying to end on a slightly optimistic note. So pick one factor that you think we should focus on to unify us as people. Okay, never mind the country, the politicians. What one factor do you pick on that would unify us as Kenyans, Ugandans, and Tanzania, despite our divergence we've seen in the data? What is the one thing that could bring us closer together? I'm going to pick mine. It's called diamond platinums, right? But let's start with you, Charles, in Uganda. What one factor, one word or a sentence will bring us together as East Africans?
Cheptegei.
The Ugandan gold medal will bring us all together. Okay, then stop teasing Tanzanians about their Olympic performance, lack thereof. Huh? Okay, we'll go to Uganda, to Kenya. Charles, what one word? We've got Cheptegei from Uganda. What one word or idea will bring us together?
I would also say, sport. I mean, just but not, of the, the Cheptegeis and the Kiplimos. Let me just give an example. I think last year there was this, the Subaru owners, drivers of Kenya visited the Subaru drivers of Uganda. And it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. I think it was so. They met in the middle, and I think the queue was like 10 kilometers long. I just said, this is so crazy, but so cool and so wonderful. So I think that things like that, I think is where it's at.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you. Christine, what will bring us together?
Gen Zs.
Viva
Viva
Gen Zs. Fearless,
Viva Gen Zs.
Tribeless, nationless. Okay, the Gen Zs. Sammy, what will bring us together?
I don't know. I was going to say Diamond, actually. Maybe I'm a fan as well. Maybe Maombi and religion. Yeah, I think Maombi will bring us together. It's about water to Naamini katika kitu. So, yeah, Maombi.
Okay, so prayer. But you people must remember there's an AFCON happening in East Africa in 2027. Maybe we can use that as a time to have an excuse for a huge party in East Africa, which brings the Gen Zs, the Subaru owners, the Kipilimos, and the Cheptegeys. We all show up here in somewhere in Tanzania. It's big enough to fit all of you. But can I please ask you to give a huge round of applause to our panelists? And I'd like to now invite you yourselves, you know, the audiences, the live audiences. This is why you are here, and maybe even online if anybody's asking some questions, making some comments. Let's start. Violet, may I disturb you to sort of look in the room and see who is there who might want to contribute a comment? We'd like more comments than questions and the impressions. And in here, let me see which hands are up in Tanzania. And perhaps you can help us. Who's in Kenya who can help us with picking over there? But we'll start with Uganda, please. Violet, is there anybody with a hand up there? If not, there's a hand up here in Tanzania.
Yes, I have 3 hands up.
You have 3 hands up. Okay, you're already winning the Olympic gold already here. Tanzania has only got 1. Okay. Please go ahead, Violet.
So I'll go to
Thank you, Eden. My name is George Lugalambi. I'm with the African Center for Media Excellence in Kampala. A comment on let me look at the perceptions around, you know, the qualities, the question regarding what qualities do you think are important to pass on to the next generation. In the case of Uganda, I'm really, you know, intrigued by, you know, how counterintuitive it is, and I think Charles Obo mentioned this, that there is a focus on hard work, there is a prioritizing of hard work, but it's also counterintuitive that there is no mention of integrity. So I would have imagined that Ugandans would really be keen on passing on the quality of integrity to the to the next generation, but it's not really mentioned, you know, anywhere, and I find that really counterintuitive in the context. Even, you know, talking about 2 years ago, but the question of, you know, hard work, yes, it's counterintuitive, but I think, you know, given the low level of, you know, productivity, you know, that all the economic data shows. It's counterintuitive that Ugandans really would want to prioritize hard work, but I think it's also a positive thing, you know, to recognize here. But finally, I'm really intrigued by, you know, across East Africa, how overrated religion and faith are. I'm really surprised that there is, we think too much about, you know, values of religion. That I find that rather disturbing. Thank you.
Thank you. But Christine was saying in Kenya, the religion has been privatized so that they themselves as individuals can make the breakthrough. Kutoboa, we call it here in Tanzania. Let's have another question or comment from Uganda, another 2, and then we'll come to Tanzania. I've only seen 1, and then we'll come to Kenya. Yeah, 2 in Tanzania. Please, Violet.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. My name is Busola Bernard. I write for this African newspaper. So my question is this: I mean, how does the political class find a middle ground at a policy level with citizens who are aggrieved over economic issues like unemployment, taxation, I mean, poor social service delivery, and even high crime rates, without losing track of the bigger regional integration agenda? For instance, I mean, how does Kenya make sure its farmers get a bigger share of the egg market without killing business for Ugandan farmers? Thank you.
Wow, that's the question. How do we solve our economic problems without stepping on each other's toes? That's a great question. I mean, you know yourselves that there are periodic bans of Ugandan milk into Kenya, or eggs into Kenya, or chickens into Kenya. You know, this is part of our challenge, I think, as East Africa. How do we actually really make this integration work for ordinary people? Unfortunately, those bans tend to protect the elite with their formal businesses who want to reduce competition even across our own borders. So it's a tough one. Maybe Charles and Christine could have some thoughts on that one there, but I'll let it marinate for now. We'll come back to you in a moment. Is there one more, Violet, there, and then we'll come to Tanzania?
Yes, Chemonges Timothy here. And really, I would like to speak to the sources of information, the sources of news, and really information. I think I'm intrigued by really how a bigger percentage of Ugandans believe or get their information through the word of mouth, which comparatively with the other countries, it's quite low. And that speaks to the threat of information, misinformation, and the issues around disinformation. And so I see that as a big threat, but also I didn't imagine that the percentage would be that high. And for a country that, say, radio still leads in terms of access to information, the threat around misinformation, disinformation is something that has intrigued me in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's an intriguing question. Word of mouth. Media, you have to, I don't know how media is going to survive the next generation of competition for newspapers, especially, which are tumbling down here. So we've got two questions in Tanzania here. Jane, could you help me get this microphone? Is the one that, there's a microphone. Or question or comments, contributions. You start then and we'll come to you, gentlemen. Any ladies in the room want to join? Anna, hello. Go ahead.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me. My name is Makumba Gomez. I work with Haki Elimu, means Right to Education in Tanzania. And
Aidan, we can't hear the Tanzanians.
hello, good morning, East Africa. My name is Makumba. I work with an organization called Haki Elimu, means Right to Education here in Tanzania. And I was listening 10 years of Sauti Zetu, and I didn't hear an indicator or a voice of citizen on the education system, or rather the education that they want. And that is kind of my interest. And I could also relate to, the findings that would have come out of the questions interrogating the voices of the citizens on the education, whether satisfied or not, with all these findings that we are looking at. For example, I was surprised when Tanzanians said their language of communication. Perhaps Aidan, you said Swahili. I don't know if they mentioned that specifically, but in terms of the language, of course, they would say Swahili, which comes third before peace and hospitality. But then on the other surveys that were done, especially to us, who were doing a survey or questioning on the language of instructions in schools, the majority mentioned to like English as the medium of instructions. So I would like to hear the voices in terms of the Sauti Zetu on how they speak about the education system and the language of instruction. And I think when I expected when the panelists were concluding, I wanted to chip in and say, well, you should mention language as the first thing that should join us as East Africa. I think it's the cheapest thing that we can manage. Kenyans, Swahili, of course. Kiswahili, we should start with that at least. I know in terms of power, and that would be kind of difficult, but language, Kenyans are already speaking. I went to Uganda, they're trying to speak. But so we should start with Swahili. That should also come as my recommendations in terms of, one thing that will bring us together and we can start immediately without delaying. But I wanted to comment on the priorities that Tanzania said as the most valuable things, peace and hospitality. I think going forward, we should also interrogate these answers because in terms, for example, on hospitality, well, they mentioned as a second most thing that they value, but I don't think we are at that level of hospitality. Going to hospitals, going to hotels, going to customer cares, I think we are worse as Tanzanians in terms of, that part. And I think the Sauti zetu should go deeper and interrogate the answers that the Wananchi are giving. Maybe because we didn't interrogate in terms of education, maybe we could have, you know. And I was surprised when they said about 67% they are not sure of the economic conditions. Maybe it's because of the education. So we should interrogate education. Thank you.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Rajab from Haki Rasilimali. I have just one question. I was so interested to hear about the citizen voices. I mean, the link between the citizen voices and the country's investment projects. For almost 10 years, you have captured so many issues like in education, entrepreneurship, health facilities, but I didn't see this, the citizen voices in terms of the government projects. I mean, big investment projects that happens within the countries, I mean, Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Deus Valentine Remamu. I work with the Center for Strategic Litigation, and I'm an avid follower of Sauti za Wananchi these years, so I commend Twaweza for having sustained it for so long. I have one question and a comment. My question is, you know, East Africans have spoken and raised these concerns, and they say clearly what they worry about the most. But many of us have raised this question either with you, Aiden, or somebody else before, is this disconnect between these genuine concerns that East Africans have with the governance question. And why are we failing to connect these two? Yeah, and then our politicians come back to us and tell us, you know, Tanzanians want water and education and food, but they don't want a good constitution. and I don't know if any of us in this room has dared to make, you know, the case for the synergy between these two, because I do believe at the heart of it, they are related. It's just that we have to figure out the relationship between the two. And then my comment would be, if there's going to be a Sauti za Wananchi 2.0, maybe it's also time we started to trace what our leaders think of us. Right? We've kept for 10 years hearing citizens of the nation and, you know, their concerns and all that. But what the hell do our leaders think? Right? Because I don't think it's out there in the public. Right? And I would make that recommendation to Twaweza to consider that as an opportunity in itself.
Thank you, Deus, for a fantastic suggestion. Yeah, I think your question about connecting governance with lived realities of citizens is a very live question. This is our attempt to inform that debate with how citizens feel and think. Oftentimes...
Sorry, Adam, we can't hear you.
To hear you.
Sorry, let me repeat. Sorry, I was using the wrong microphone. Deus makes an point, the disconnect between people's lived realities and their opinion about it and the governance frameworks that generate or facilitate or constrain those lived realities. And I think the important thing is often in the past, that's why maybe part of the contribution of Sauti is that citizens' voices were assumed to be of a particular type. The politician would say, Wananchi wanasema, the citizens are saying this is what they want. We wanted the citizens to speak for themselves. So this is that. And maybe the other contribution is maybe, and this is the hard work for politicians to really genuinely listen to these. The first reaction often is, they don't know what they're talking about. They haven't read the Constitution. They don't know what the laws are. They don't, however, the same politicians come to you to ask for your vote, right? So they respect you when you're voting. After that, they tend to be, you don't know, we know what's best for you. So this is an attempt to try and inform that dialogue, that conversation a little bit more. We'll see what contribution will be, but we'll see if we can find some people, leaders, to take our Sauti za viongozi poll. Okay, we shall try that. Melania, I've been hearing you. Please, we'd like to invite
Kenya. So we have a couple of hands here, I think like 3 to 4. So I'll start with Betty.
Let's have 3, yeah? And then we'll have 1 online. Fulgence, please don't go away. We'll come to you soon.
Thank you. Betty Kimani is my name, from Kiambu County, representing Bunge Mashinani Initiative and Bunge Mashinani School of Governance. Mine is not a question, it is a concern. I am saddened by the fact that one of the challenges in the compendium that has been raised is on the access to clean water is distance. And it is sad to see that it is Kenya who is leading with 33%. 10 years after devolution, and water is a devolved function, we still have women in this country who cannot access water. And this has reflected very well in women's spaces. If you look at the citizen participation in community meetings, women are standing at 48%, while men are standing at 64%. When are women going to have their spaces? When are women going to have, actively participate in community meetings so that we can raise our voices and represent women in their spaces? And I think this has been brought about by unpaid care work, where childcare is a gendered role to the women. And when we see that distance to water points affects women, because it is women who are going to go to fetch for this water so that they can be able to participate in domestic care work. It is sad, and I think it is time we level the playing field so that even women so that we can ensure that having children does not limit women from participating in all spheres. I end it at there.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Janet Ngombalu from Christian Aid here in Kenya. I want to recognize all those who worked on the study across East Africa. And generally, I also am a Gen Z wannabe. When I grow up, I want to be a Gen Z. However, for the study, based on that issue, I'm surprised that we are still not looking at governance or connecting as governance, because a country is as good as its leaders. The reason we are perpetually in these issues is because of our leadership, and therefore good governance needs to be at the limelight of what we are talking about. And looking at the study, I know it portrays that it's the lowest. However, I am thinking because of what has happened in holding governments into account, asking for transparency and accountability of governments going forward, this could be a potential area that Taweza can look at going forward, because I have a feeling this data, the study was done in 2022. 2023 and 2024, there's been a lot of awareness creation, and that's what we saw led to the fall of the finance bill 2023 and also the finance bill here in Kenya 2024. It's because people are now engaging in governments and calling governments to account. And we are hoping that the next study will bring out these things, and it's something that can bring us together. The other thing, as a East Africa region, debt, especially public debt, is going to be another area that we can focus on, because if 70% of our income and revenue as countries is going towards repaying of debt, it means that we are not foreseeing any changes in livelihoods going forward. We are not going any changes in public services, because it means that we will not be able to afford. But how we work through the debt issue, the public finance issue, I'm hoping that is another thing that Twaweza can be able to look out for in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. One more there
Yes.
And we'll go online.
Thank you very much. I'm Suba Churchill. I represent the Kenya National Civil Society Center. A couple of comments, not a question at all, but you know, one thing I found amusing about the fact of the finding that majority of people of Uganda prefer the spoken word is that every time I visit Uganda, and of course there is always this ritual of wanting to go and do a boat ride to the source of the Nile, Ugandans dispute the fact, and in fact what we were taught in history here in Kenya, that the first man to see Lake Victoria, to discover Lake Victoria, and the source of the River Nile was John Hanning's Peak. Yet, you know, if it is not written, it doesn't exist. That is how the world is, and so I would urge you know, my good friends in Uganda to surrender the patent to John Hanning's Peak and stop the dispute, because if you're just going to pass it by word of mouth, then it doesn't earn your patent. But that's on a lighter note. I look at the statistics around sources of income for households, and I think that for Kenya, you know, 37% casual could be an underrepresentation. And I say that because in this country, we have almost, you know, it has become an official thing for government to tell us about remittances from diaspora. A lot of them do casual work. In fact, until recently, you know, the UK was the leading, I think UK or US, but now Saudi Arabia has overtaken America and Europe in terms of destinations where Kenya go to do work. And we all know that, you know, the Kenyans in the Saudi Arabia and the Middle East generally are not involved in drilling oil in those countries. They are involved in domestic work and so on and so forth. So these figures could be, if Kenyans were asked, you know, particularly depending on how households increasingly depend on remittances from their counterparts that have had opportunity to fly out, the casual percentage for casual work could be higher than, you know, these statistics indicate. What I find most intriguing, and that's my last comment, is about, you know, the levels of participation in public affairs, and especially the reporting on, you know, community meetings and so on. And I find it intriguing because Kenya ideally should rank very high, but because our constitution, we have a very rights-based, you know, constitution that places public participation as one of the requirements and national values of governance. But again, the tragedy of our devolved system is that our devolved governments have been hijacked by rural elite. Citizens have been put on the periphery, and even as Gen Zs finish up with the national executive and hopefully the national parliament, I think there'll be a lot of Occupy, you know, county governments, and it's already started in Bomet, you know, Nandi and so on. There's a lot of disaffection with the manner in which our devolved units are being, you know, governed. And so I find it really intriguing that despite, you know, our most rights-based constitutional framework compared to, you know, maybe that of Uganda and Tanzania, that public participation and engagement in community affairs is the lowest. And I think that for me is a challenge because it means that, you know, Kenyans remain largely marginalized and sidelined from governance issues. I'm not surprised with the low levels of agriculture in Kenya because as late as 2023, we used to know when we were growing up and when we were aspiring to join the universities. I'm myself a product of Egerton University. And we used to know that Egerton was set up as an agriculture-based. Today, you cannot recognize any university as, known for a particular specialty. There are each university, each or many public universities, are a mongrel of all sorts of courses. You cannot really say Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture is still focused on agriculture and technology. They admit more students studying law than even agriculture. And as late as 2023, Egerton was scrapping courses, agriculture-based courses. So I'm not really surprised by these figures. And it's interesting how our new cabinet secretary for agriculture, for example, will base their planning on this and hopefully take back people to agriculture because it no longer pays. Our bookshops in Nairobi are the most endangered premises. They are increasingly turning into restaurants. Most of the book stands I see on the streets sell stories on how to get rich quickly. And you get the sense why, Kenyans are no longer, finding value in agriculture because it requires a lot of hard work and soiling hands. And Kenyans' sense of workmanship has shifted considerably in the last couple of years. And people believe in miracles and jackpots and those kind of things. No wonder there's a lot of conning in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your wide-ranging views. Let's invite Fulgence Masawe. You're online. Can I ask you to switch on your video, unmute yourself, and make a contribution? Fulgence, Karibu.
Thank you, Aidan, and thank you, everyone, for this wonderful opportunity and sharing your findings. It's very interesting. Anyway, I can't switch on the video. I don't know. It's about you, the host there. Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have the feelings that where Tanzania performed very well, this kind of Stockholm syndrome, that we've fallen in love with our problems. We become part of it because, I don't know, the reflection, I wish I could see the questions which you put across to these people to come out with these findings. And the another interesting thing is about what do we want to pass to the next generation. I'm shocked to see that education is faring very poor. Makumba is here from Wakielimu. I don't know. Tanzania is 2% in Kenya. I don't see it anywhere. At least Uganda, they think that they can pass it in the next generation. It's 23%. My question is here. We spend most of our resources preparing our kids to go to school, finding the best school. All our incomes are going to educate these young ones. And even ourselves, we spend almost half of our lifetime in educating ourselves. So how has it become so irrelevant and religious beliefs is on top? Is there any problem or is there anything to do with mental health with us in the region? It's something we have to think about it. It is worrisome, Aidan, you are laughing. Education is not favorable at all, while we are spending a lot around that and paying expensive school. We don't want to pass it to the next generation. And the other thing is the issue of food security. I could see Kenya, we are working around the GMO and so forth, how comfortable people are with this GMO. And once GMO is introduced in Kenya, the seeds has no boundaries. You'll find it in Uganda, you found it in Tanzania, across the region. It's something which I think that we should address it when we are talking about food security. I know some Ugandans went to court to challenge Kenya move to introduce GMO in their country, which they think it is a threat to the seeds and so forth. Those are the few things I have from my side. But this issue of education, I wish I could hear from the researchers why these findings and why we are investing a lot around this area. Thank you, Aidan. Fulgence from Legal Edumara Center, Tanzania.
Thank you very much, Fulgence. You are the second person after Charles O to question about East Africans' mental health. He called us bipolar, You're asking, whether tuna akili timam, if we're not prioritizing sending our children to school. Fulgence, the question we ask is, what values would you like to pass on to the next generation? And they had a choice of three of them. So if education is low, it might reflect the fact that their own education did not really pay back for them, right? And so they're thinking, maybe for my children, they need to be hardworking, they need to have faith, they need to be more independent than perhaps I was. So there's a question that the first gentleman spoke about in Uganda about hard work. There's also a notion that parents would like to relive their own lives through their children. So parents who maybe didn't do such hard work, maybe want their children to work really, really hard on their behalf. So it's called vicariously living through your children. Sometimes that's what we anticipate. We put on them our own expectations of our own lives, and our children, they're called Gen Z, will rebel. That's why in Kenya we're saying, "Nye wazazi mnaogopa, acha sisi tufanye ya kwetu. You stay home, you be quiet. We're fighting for you. Don't worry, we'll be fine." So let me invite Robert Suna. I think you're in Uganda. Please unmute yourself, and if you can, put your video on so we can see you and make your comment. Robert, are you still here? Maybe Robert he's not able to join. Are there any more comments? We go around, one in each country again. Yes, we've got one here. We grabbed it. Robert.
Two here in Uganda.
You have two there. We'll start in Tanzania, one. We'll come to you, Violet, with two. Any in Kenya? Melania.
Thank you, moderator.
Thank you, Robert. Go ahead. Then we'll have another Robert after you.
So I had challenges with the host unmuting me, but I think they have allowed me to speak now. Thank you so very much, for putting this together, and I'm really impressed with the trends and making the fact that you moved this in 10 years. First and foremost, my name is Robert Suna, and I'm an independent consultant on tax, trade, and investment. So I'm naturally an economic policy analyst, and I have so much enthusiasm about these things happening around the region. I'm really happy about the findings, and from the economics perspective, I wish all these could be bundled into just one single model, which would take many academic rigors to find out. But specifically, the idea of food security in the country, in Uganda, and I think, like you said, the data is generated by citizens, is very intriguing. One of the factors that Ugandans have always been known for that prevents them from overly engaging in governance issues has been the issue of food security. They always believe that a hungry man is an angry man. So Ugandans are naturally able to eat, and whatever goes on elsewhere in the circles of other than food, it is very difficult for you to excite them about engaging in governance issues. So Ugandans believe sometimes that maybe the anger in Kenya or the semi-arid idea of not being able to practice agriculture when you mobilize Kenyans against a revolution on governance, it is faster than in Uganda. That's something to talk about the next day. But what I think could be the major causes of such a trend to see that there's some bit of food stress is one, the component of regional integration. The markets are open in South Sudan, Congo, Kenya, and maybe Tanzania. And then there is this issue of middlemen benefiting a lot from, and it touches the idea, of course, that my brother Mangusia brought on board. The farm gate price vis-a-vis what it would fetch in Tanzania, or it would fetch in South Sudan, or in Congo, or in Kenya. There is a very big mismatch. So you find that a farmer may prefer to sell to individuals who are exporting the food as opposed to those who are going to sell within the country. That means that now you're going to discuss the dynamics of demand and supply. So the available supply for the local market in the end may be lower and the prices may be driven by that artificial shortage created by the access to markets in the other regions for the same product. That's one component. The other issue that I wanted to comment about is to do with the unifying factors for the East African community. And for me, I think the gentleman who talked about language was very spot on, because you find we have so many tribes in Uganda, in Tanzania, in Kenya, but the fact that Kenyans are able to speak and communicate well in Kiswahili in Tanzania, that's a unifying factor. In Uganda, with there's so many tribes, and if you don't speak English, it's very difficult for you to be unified. So the aspect of having Kiswahili as a language for unification would be good. Where I grew up from, Kiswahili was used by Wajejeshi na Waizi. So you would hear toa viato, toa pesa, remove your belt and the rest. So you grew up thinking that this is a language for such individuals. You don't join the army, you don't speak it. If you're not a thief or you want to intimidate someone, you don't speak that language. And a culture that lacks such a unifier may make it difficult for us to unite. Finally, the idea of what we pass on to our children. Naturally in Uganda, we knew that it is only Indians who train their people business, who train their families business. It was difficult for me to learn what my father was doing. I would be educated and get a job employed, and that was it. So passing on, the best thing we used to pass on, which is still even here in our culture, is religion. I mean, you are born a Catholic or an Anglican, you go to church with your parents every Sunday. No matter how busy your father is, they were always very sure that Sunday is for family to go to church. So it is not surprising that such a result comes out that the biggest virtue they would pass on would be religion. I doubt the hard work aspect. I agree with Charles. I submit and I thank you.
Thank you, Robert. All of you are very skeptical about the hard work thing that your fellow citizens are saying is important to pass on to their children. Melania, before you go, we have Robert in here, and then we'll come to, in fact, we're going to go to Uganda first and then to you to finish off this round.
Okay, fine.
Thank you, Eden. Two quick comments. My name is Robert Mompembo. I come from Creative Industry Network, Tanzania. Having been into the review of East Africa Common Market Protocols, it is obvious that the governments are doing little in terms of implementing the very protocols that they agreed with. And practically, these protocols are supposed to increase the exchange of goods and people between these countries. So currently, Rwanda was quite much ahead if you look into the data and what they have done. And this practically would actually improve business, and the business would actually integrate people. You have mentioned Diamond, but actually Diamond is a business. Onyango has mentioned sports, but sports is a business. So I believe that's that's the first thing to do. Secondly, I think I was looking at the data that you have given us. The question of ignorance is bliss comes into mind. And the clarity of the people gives them more room to be critique of their own governments. Now, this is specific for the area of governance. I believe that Kenyans have more clarity in terms of governance than Tanzanians. That is why they can be more critical of their governments. As you have mentioned, Generation Z, what has really happened is in Tanzania, we have an increase of the budget of about 7 trillion or more this year compared to 2023, 24, and 24, 25. So this 7 trillion increase is actually translated into taxes. And there was nothing that is happening in Tanzania in terms of citizens arguing against these kind of increases. And in Kenya, we saw what happened. So clarity of the people, I think maybe could be an issue of Sauti za Wananchi in the future. Like, are Kenyans more clear of what is happening than Tanzanians? And if so, what is the position of other people, the people of the other countries? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robert, for those observations. There's one hypothesis completely untested to suggest, you saw Kenya, 17% are in formal employment, which means they're inside the tax net. Remember, Charles Obo said, you Tanzanians are lying about your assets that you own. It's possible. The reason why Tanzanians don't protest about taxes is because many of us don't pay them. Many of us are outside the tax net, so it's okay. Raise them as high as you want. Whereas in Kenya, I can tell you, I know from experience and from my colleagues there, housing levy, this levy, that levy hits them directly and hard, you know? And many more Kenyans are inside the KRA tax net than the proportion of Tanzanians who are inside the TRA tax net. So I think that is perhaps one of the reasons why the Kenyans will stand up and make noise when the finance bills hurt their pockets. Let me go to Uganda. Uganda, please, Violet, let's have a couple of comments from there. Then we shall finish with Kenya.
Yes, I'll pass on the mic to Judith, then to Honorable Winnie. The two ladies.
Yes, good morning, everyone, once again. My name is
Good morning.
Jackie Binen, and I work for a forum in Parliament, Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Water, Sanitation and Hygiene. This is an advocacy platform in the Parliament of Uganda. For mine will not be a question, but I would just like to applaud and join the celebration of the 10 years of Sauti za Wananchi, sorry about that, yeah. Tuaweza has done quite a commendable job over the years. They have partnered with Uganda Parliamentary Forum in giving us a lot of research work and data. And this is able to equip our members of parliament, especially in the sector of water, sanitation and hygiene, to give them a sense of direction in their advocacy. So this research and information being disseminated enables people to know what the people want, what the people think about. I think there's been so many areas that has been tackled, and this enriches the advocacy. So for me, I am grateful for these efforts. Of course, so many questions have come in, which is good because we are able to see the gaps in these reports, and for next time purposes, we can dwell into those gaps. But for now, I join the celebration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for your presence and for collaborating with us in Uganda.
I am Winnie Kiza, coming from the Alliance for National Transformation, a political party, and I'm a politician. I equally wish to thank Twaweza, and I would like to join my sister Jackie to celebrate the 10 years of Sauti za Wananchi. And if I may be allowed the latitude of using John Maxwell's word, we should all know that everything rises and falls on leadership. And so if the Wananchi cannot understand that governance is very critical, that when they were looking at their challenges, they went to public service, they went to the economics, but they didn't look at governance as the key factor. While it was an issue that was mentioned, I thought the Wananchi should be in position to put governance at the center of everything that happens in their countries. If you look at the demonstrations happening in the East African community, the Gen Zs in Kenya, the Gen Zs in Uganda here. In Kenya, it started with the issue of the tax bill. In Uganda here, it's about corruption. What does this say? It is an issue of governance. When you come to Uganda, for example, our budget of this financial year is 72 trillion. The debt burden of the country, 79 trillion. What does this speak in terms of service delivery? Look at a report of the auditor of the IGG, which says every financial year, 10 trillion is stolen in public offices. What does this speak about the quality of service that will be given to the citizens of Uganda? So if we are to get what we would really have gotten as a Wananchi, each Wananchi should put governance at the core of their thinking. And I think one of the brothers said, what do our leaders say? Our leaders will want to hear what you say if they are worth the positions that they occupy. So it is up to us, the Wananchi, to put our leaders on pressure to make sure that they do what we think they should be doing. And this calls us to being very selective when we are choosing the people who should lead us. Are they for us or for themselves? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your very astute observation about the centrality of governance. I think, as I was mentioned today, was part of getting that connection done is for the people to speak for themselves and not have them spoken for by other people. That's the contribution of Sauti za Wananchi. Sauti za Wananchi themselves, they speak for themselves so that maybe the quality of the conversation with the politicians and the leaders takes on a different flavor. Thank you. So let's go to Kenya for a couple more comments and then we shall close up this session. Melania, karibu.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Mabonga from Katiba Institute, an organization based in Nairobi. So I have two or three just comments. One is about citizen participation. I was also shocked about the findings. I thought that Kenya could rank a little bit higher than the Tanzania and Uganda. And probably a question that we should ask ourselves going forward is just participation enough, or we also look at the quality of participation? For example, do you just attend a meeting and whatever is said in the meeting is approved, or you approve it as a participant, or will you ask questions? If, for example, it's a matter of budget, will you ask questions? Will you challenge what is presented? So maybe we will need to consider that. Then, as my previous speaker has said, it is worrying that people across the East African countries, the three countries, are not keen about the governance issue. And probably that's why they responded to that question of what they want to pass on to the next generation as things like what they cited, instead of pointing out issues of integrity, issues of accountability, or issues of transparency. Because when you look at my last comment, another aspect finding on a very important right, a very important human right, and that is access to drinking water. The reasons given, distance to water points, insufficient, those points out to leadership, poor leadership. And that's a governance issue. And I also suggest, and I think that if we have colleagues in the media industry, maybe those are some of the areas they should highlight more, because they cut across the three countries and they are critical. Access to clean water is a critical human right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more from there?
Yes,
good afternoon. I'm Dennis Esikuri from the Social Justice Centers in Kenya currently, and I'm the research convener. My comments are based on the two threats moving forward. And I carry from the study whereby I see most Kenyans and Ugandans are concerned about their country's direction. And as you can see, us from Kenya, post the Gen Z protest, it seems now the civil society, we are left in our own hands and ourselves to go on with the struggle. And as social justice centers, we've been doing all this man of protest alone. Even we did the Sita protest up to the parliament and we gave our petitions. But right now we are being profiled as we have now left alone. Even if we start organizing our community dialogues, what we usually do, because we fight all manner of injustices in our communities. But right now we are a target by the police and by the state. So moving forward, what is the solution for us? What can we say as this grassroots community mobilizers? Another thing I see, there's a threat on negotiated democracy in these two countries, in the three countries, Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya. Like in Kenya, we see a man of all coalitions post-elections becoming a threat to issues to do with opposition oversight and accountability. In Tanzania, we are seeing CCM party negotiated democracy, whereby other leaders who seem to be the future, progressive futures, are being left outside. In Uganda, long-serving head of states. So I see these are threats moving forward as the ESC community. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think, Aidan, we're done for Kenya.
Okay, thank you. And well, I want to thank you all for your contributions, your challenges, your suggestions and proposals for Sauti za Viongozi, the issue to really center the issue of governance in these conversations. But that is, it was a subtle, very interesting theme for us to talk about, that we are the way we are, and why is it that we are the way we are, and we're living, the lives that we're living. But I also enjoyed the fact that, you saw there's some hope for some unification in language, in the cultural aspects, Robert, sports, entertainment, and those areas which, interestingly, are a bit outside of politics. Is it the case that maybe we're giving up on politics as we've known it? Politics, old school, politics 1.0, and people are going other spaces. The social media, even word of mouth, is a form of exit that people are doing from the traditional way that we've been leading and governing ourselves. So we've had a great conversation, I thought. I want to just quickly maybe go back to our panelists. You've been listening very patiently. If there's any one or two points or things that you will take away from this conversation. We'll start with you in Kenya, with Christine, and then Charles O, and then we'll go to Uganda with Charles M. We'll finish here in Tanzania with my friend Sammy. Christine, any takeaways from you from this conversation?
Lots of takeaways. I found the Sauti za Viongozi very interesting. If you can find a way for them to be honest, because lying is a problem. So I think we can sometimes infer what our leaders think of us from their actions, but if there's a way for them to actually, for us to capture it in a data format like this one, I think sometimes the power is just in the data, right? I think that would be a good challenge for Twaweza to take on.
Thank you for that challenge, the two of you. Thank you. Charles O, what are your takeaways?
I was fascinated by some of the discussion around, the East African project. But before I go there, I just wanted to say something about, the data that shows that Ugandans want to pass on the value of hard work to their. Oh, sorry. I just want first to comment on this, the finding that Ugandans want to pass on the value of hard work to their children. When I said that, that I was surprised. Actually, I meant it in a good way, in that it reveals to me a transformation which I knew had been there. I mean, was happening, but I didn't know it was this strong. So that and it ties to the question of food security, that this tendency we are seeing towards greater, commercialization of the food market. I think that's what we should take, which in Uganda is, something is happening in Uganda which you don't see in the rest of East Africa. There's a very large movement back to the land. And the data on agriculture, if you look closer at it, a lot of it is of this middle class that is moving back to the land. And, within that, they have also created demand pressures. And, they have created some new price distortions in rural food markets. So I'm excited about it. But then the other thing which I want to speak to, which I've said, this whole question of which has risen about East Africa, and Aidan, you had asked earlier that what do you see in the report that points to demand areas for policy action at an East African level? When you come to the section of inputs and agriculture, across the board we see a lot of East Africans are very concerned about lack of access or cost of input into business and agriculture. And I was thinking that from a policy point of view, this is a pointer to some initiatives around regional infrastructure. I think Charles M. had mentioned the food markets. I think that this question of the eggs that had come, that I think we have a solution to just look in new ways at regional infrastructure and the way we structure our food markets, because I think that it would help reduce a lot of this conflict, because the fight over Ugandan eggs is really a fight over scarcity. If the markets were structured differently, there would be the demand for Kenya's Ugandan eggs would be more than Uganda would supply. So I think that from a policy point of view, there are very interesting pointers here as to how we can restructure joint infrastructure and along with that, food markets and financial markets for funding this kind of initiatives in a regional way.
Thank you, Charles. That's a very concrete takeaway. Let's free the food trade across the East African community, or at least these three countries, and hopefully farmers will get better prices for their food, maybe more production, more productivity, and paradoxically, greater food security for consumers in this part of the world. So thank you so much for that, Charles. Charles M., what's your takeaway?
My takeaway is two things. One, I want to go back to where we started. The links that this data creates for us. Our main source of income in Uganda, how we communicate by word of mouth is something that we need to think about, and how that links to the other questions that we need to ask internally within East Africa. But my takeaway is what you said, Aiden. What could bring us together as East Africans more? And you talked about AFCON coming up. But that will come and pass. What is more sustainable to bring us together? And I ask the question always, if you're traveling within East Africa, one of the most intriguing questions that you face at points of entry is it disturbs when you're asked, how many days are you staying? Where will you be staying? What are you here to do? And I'm wondering whether the policymakers or at governance level, that could be dealt with better. It's comforting to walk through the airport and you only have your ID and you're going, you don't need a visa. But when you get asked that question, you quickly realize that I am Ugandan, I am entering Kenya. I am Ugandan, I'm Kenyan, I'm now in Tanzania. If it comes to the newer members of the community, South Sudan, DR Congo, it becomes an even more complicated question. And I'm thinking maybe more citizen voices on those issues of our integration should be listened to, and that the leaders should be able to pick some of those up and actualize this East Africanness, because you realize that Uganda being largely agricultural, it has the potential to feed the rest of the community. How do we harness that if we have some of these other issues? People talk about eggs, milk, and other things. We need to interrogate a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would love to be able to go to countries and say, Oh, Tanzania karibu. Ka siku nazozitaka. Welcome. Stay as long as you want. Wouldn't that be nice? Let's send a petition to our immigration officers to stop asking those questions. Can we do that? You suspicious Tanzanian, you, Sammy. What's your takeaway?
I think my takeaway is concern on food stress. I don't think our leaders are as concerned as they should. Because one, it means that our farmers are not producing enough, but also our people are not earning enough to afford the food price that's there. At the moment, I feel like religious leaders and our rogue, prophets are giving hope to people. But for how long will that last? I think that's a question that we really need to ask ourselves. Last month, when small traders went on strike, I was speaking with them in Kariakoo, Manzese, and Ubungo. Most of these are young people who have left villages. They're not going back to agriculture. They cannot use their certificates, and small trade is their last resort. Last night when I was coming from Dodoma at the SGR station there, I think there were more Bajaj drivers and Boda Boda drivers than passengers. It was a lot of people there. And you feel like if they cannot go back to agriculture, if they cannot find hope in farming, and they're hungry, and this is not working for them, what will happen next? And I think that's my biggest concern. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you, Charles in Uganda, Charles O in Kenya, and Christine. Thank you so much for agreeing to be our panelists and the provokers of this conversation. Thank you especially to all of the live audiences in the 3 countries. I have some good news for you. Lunch is ready. I can announce like an angel from on high, like I know what's going on in Kenya and Uganda, but I can tell you, your lunch is ready. And so we'd really like to appreciate your time, your comments, your engagement with this report. A special huge thanks to our technical team from MCI, from the Chanzo, from our friends Moses in Kenya. I don't know the name of your company, but you'll forgive me. But this has been an amazing technical experience. It worked. So Christine, your and my prayers to the tech gods seem to have been answered. For that one, but really quite an amazing thing. Maybe the first time we've done this. But I must observe, this can only happen in East Africa so easily, right? Which other part of the African continent can you do this kind of conversation across 3 countries on data from 3 countries in a language that we don't understand, even though it's the colonialists' language? But I think this is a fantastic opportunity. And to thank you, and to invite you, and to thank my team. Can I please thank my team? I think you need to come and stand next to me, Kelvin, David, Miriam, Anastasia, who's over there, Samiat, and Jane, for doing such an amazing job. I told them, let's do this, and then I ran away and let them deal with all of the content. And Barwan is over there. This is the brilliant team who conceptualized this and put it all together. There's probably somebody listening from very far away called Ben. Serengeti Bites. Oh, so where's Serengeti? Michael, thank you. I'll show you the link to the website, which they were really hard to put together with downloadable everything and the data and everything else. Thank you so much, Michael. And if Ben T, you're online somewhere, Ben Taylor, you know where you are. We want to thank you also for your incredible contribution. And I'm going to beam for you who want to do what? To download the report. Let me beam where you can get it. Over here. It's over there somewhere. So to download the report, to get your Sauti the Wananchi Compendium, find that URL and you'll be able to download, read, comment, share, like, and let's continue this conversation all together. Otherwise, thank you so much for being with us and for your time, and welcome indeed for lunch, paid for you by the citizens of other countries. Karibuni. Oh, one more thing. Sorry if I'm still live in the other countries. We need your feedback. We want to see where we can improve on these things. So for Tanzania, we've sent you emails. Please share your feedback from those emails. Team Uganda, Team Kenya, and participants there, please scan the QR codes to access a link for your feedback. So we're trying to be very digital and very technical here. That's why there's no physical copies. It's all digital now with our report. Thank you very much.
We've been dismissed with lunch. So karibu for lunch.